Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today we're talking about the new expansion, Prismatic Evolutions, which was recently revealed. We kind of knew about it, but now we know a bit more, and this is a really interesting looking set. It's a mini set, but it features the evolutions, in case you can't tell from the pack art. It features all of them, and yes, they're all in the pack art plus EV itself. So we're seeing these cards. We've taken a look at a few of them. We've seen, I believe, three of them. I covered EVEX on the channel, and the Sylveon EX is also the Sylveon EX we've talked about before, although I haven't talked about it too much and not within the context of the within the context of the evolution box, because we haven't seen the evolutions. There are, I don't know where it shows it. I think it's we're getting reprints of the regular single prize evolutions. I'm not really familiar with them, to be honest. I haven't really played with these cards. Oh, so these three, the Flareon, the Vaporeon, and the Jolteon are pretty solid reversal energy attackers. Then you have the others. I don't remember what they do particularly well, but I remember they're not that strong. They're pretty mediocre cards, not terrible, but ultimately don't have super high value, especially with the new Eevee, or the new Eevee that is coming out really soon in a few days in Surging Sparks, which is gonna be in this set. I'm not sure if it's in the set or if we're getting a different EV, but we are getting EVEX, which we've talked about. I've talked about, I think, and I'll talk about some more. There's also a good chunk of cards in this set, which is pretty cool. So this is a mini set, but it's like a pretty bulky mini set, pretty beefy one. Kind of like, I was gonna say, what was the set we had? What was it called? I'm blanking on set names. What is it? Shrouded Fable. There we go. Which was not a very big set, but ultimately had a lot of cards. This has the same amount of cards as Stellar Crown. We go to the Justin Basil website. This is a really useful set. Yeah, it does say it is a mini set, but it is a pretty big size, which is really impressive and really cool, meaning that it will have some good stuff, presumably. It probably won't have a ton of good cards. It'll be a lot of filler, to be honest, and reprints and stuff, but a bunch of cool cards. Oh yeah, so this is the Eevee that I was talking about. If it's in the active, you can evolve turn one, or you can just evolve it immediately, turn one, or the turn you play it, or whatever. It's a really, really good card. Outside of that, in these, we see the different evolutions. So this one is pretty mediocre. This one it's also pretty mediocre. I mean, they're all pretty mediocre. These three are not bad with Reversal Energy, but Reversal Energy does not work with the EX Pokemon because they have rule boxes. So ultimately, there's not necessarily going to be a ton of synergy between these evolutions. The Eevee certainly will, but not the evolutions, and these evolutions. We'll talk. There's some weird stuff going on with these cards, but we'll start off talking about these first two cards revealed. There also were some other cards revealed. I guess I'll talk about this Strikeout. It's a card. It's not very good, but it's a card, so I figured I'd mention it. And then we have this Hoothoot. This Hoothoot is it's not only not good, it's really bad. It can't be put to sleep, which is not a thing that really matters at all, ever. Noctowl, or this is Hoothoot, but Noctowl is good, right? We got the really good Noctowl from Stellar Crown. There was apparently another one from Temporal Forces. Oh yeah, this one. So that one's not as good. And there's another Noctowl from Astral Radiance format, apparently. Yeah, but the good one obviously is from Stellar Crown, and there is a Hoothoot which has 70 HP and one retreat. There are actually two. There's also this one which has a usable ability, but ultimately not a particularly good card, unless it counters special Crushing Hammer or other hammer cards from, well, it doesn't counter them perfectly. If they're returning it to your hand or deck or something, it's not stopping it, but it stops Crushing Hammer on your bench Pokemon, but that's really niche. And so ultimately pretty bad, but the other Hoots are good. They have one retreat. This one has two retreat. This one has more HP. It's bad because you want the 70 HP threshold for Buddy Buddy Poffin. And we have the supporter there, Larry's Professionalism, which says discard your hand, search your deck for one Pokemon, one supporter, and a basic energy, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. This is pretty interesting. It's not a super great supporter, but it does get you another supporter, which is good for next turn, though it is your only supporter in hand guaranteed, unless you get Lumineon V, which doesn't really make any sense. The Pokemon's probably the card that's going to have the highest value here. Getting a basic energy is certainly okay. There are decks that want basic energies in their hand a lot. For example, TMS Ogerpon EX, but decks with that in it. It's not usually that as an attacker, or not a main attacker, but could be pairing it with something like that. But then also, you're probably looking for some other supporter to play that turn as well. So ultimately, it's a pretty sketchy supporter, probably not a very good one. But then we do have EVEX. This has an attack that does 200 for Fire, Water, Lightning, which are, of course, the types of Flareon, Flareon EX, yes, Jolteon, and Vaporeon. Those three, which all have EXs, which all have an attack for that same cost, Fire, Water, Lightning, that does 280, and then can attack next turn, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But the big thing with EVEX is that its ability says it can evolve. It's a Pokemon EX that can evolve into the Pokemon EXs that evolve from Eevee. Only the EXs, you can't evolve it in the single prizers. Also, there is a Sylveon coming in the next set. That's not the right Sylveon. Maybe it's, oh yeah, it came out. No, there was definitely a Sylveon that's coming out soon. I believe that is going to, I don't remember all the, there's a Sylveon that's like a walling Pokemon that's pretty solid. And so that one you're not going to be able to play within, yeah, I don't know where it is, but there's a Sylveon. It's kind of like Mimikyu, and it walls, I believe, EXs and might wall Vs too. It doesn't really matter. And that's a pretty cool card that will not evolve from the EVEX. I'm pretty sure it's not in Surgey Sparks. At first I thought it was, but I guess it's just the regular Sylveon. But it's not in this set. There's so many Eevelutions that are. Oh no, it is in this set. Yeah, so I guess we're getting 3 Sylveons in this set. It's kind of a bit of a mess with all these Eevelutions. But anyways, we have Flareon EX. Or actually, no, I'll talk about Sylveon EX first because that one we've already seen. Which, as I said, we're getting 2 other Sylveons in the same set, but they're not new. One of them is new, but the other 2 aren't. And anyways, this Sylveon EX says you can do 160 for 3, and the defending Pokemon's attacks do 100 less next turn. This is actually okay for like reducing attack damage output. And we're going to be looking at these cards within context individually as well as within the context of the other decks. And you have this attack that's okay. And Sylveon EX has actually seen some play in Japan, especially for its second attack as well, which is really interesting. Angelite, which says it does for Water, Lightning, Psychic, choose 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. They shuffle those Pokemon, all cards attached back into the deck, but you cannot use this attack back-to-back turns at all. Like, you can't switch it in or out, or play like a different Pokemon with the same attack. No, you can't use it back-to-back at all, ever. This is a pretty interesting attack that is theoretically really brutal for your opponent on the turn that you use it, but it's also really, really hard to pay, and it's pretty awkward. Ultimately, this card is kind of interesting with some level of potential if you can use this, and there are actually some other attacks kind of like it, but ultimately it isn't super strong. Looking at how much play it has seen in Japan so far, it's not seen that much play. It's kind of weird to power up. If you want to power up its second attack, you are probably looking at maybe Lost Zone. There's this Sylveon EX box with like Pidgeot. This is a weird Pidgeot control list, and Sylveon EX, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Then we have a couple of Gardevoir EX lists as well, where you can just power up the Psychic Energy that way. And then getting the other energy on, you can just manually attach maybe, and you can do some stuff like that. This energy's typing. This has 5 basic energies. This is pretty crazy. It's also a 1-1-1 line. So, no, it's a 1-1 line, and then you have a bunch of Psychic energies. So, it's an interesting list there, but that's just like a kind of random one. And this one is a bit more Sylveon focused with Sparkling Crystal and Crispin. That's probably how you're looking to power up most of these Eevelutions, with Crispin to accelerate energy off of a supporter, plus Sparkling Crystal, plus your attachment, and that's the attack. If you can't pull that off, you can just do one of those things. You can attach 2 turns, and then you can get the knockout. There's also this list. I don't know what this list is. This is another, control box Sylveon EX list. You can apply pressure to your opponent in weird ways and cause problems for them. But ultimately, it's not like a super powerful card. It's an okay card, but it's only been played this many times in the Japanese City League tournaments, placing in top 16. Then we have we'll go to the Flareon now, which does the attack. I'm gonna stop like saying the names because I don't like know like what they're all rocks, and they're like different types of rocks, and I don't know what these like what is this? I've never heard of this. But anyway, so you can do 280 for the 3 and cannot attack next turn. You got the same attack here on Jolteon EX, and you have the same attack on. Oh wait, that would be. It'll be your Vaporeon EX. It's the same exact attack. It does have different names. Ultimately, what's Vaporeon? Jolteon does have free retreat, which means you can get out of that easier. But it's kind of weird. You kind of want to play these together, but ultimately, there's not really a difference between attacking with the different ones, except for weakness, which will come up some, but it's not that big of a deal. Especially when you're hitting 280. You're one-shotting most things, and the things you're not one-shotting, you're not like consistently hitting lots of different weakness types. And it's the same energy cost. It's very weird how like you're kind of supposed to play this together, I guess, but it's kind of weird. The attack isn't that good. It's not that bad either. It's okay, but it's nothing special. It's high damage output, but of course an awkward attack cost. It's very comparable to Giratina V-Star, except that's 2 energy types as opposed to 3, which is a massive difference. Then we have Flareon EXs, and by the way, Flareon EX was revealed before the others, except for Sylveon EX. So we'll start with this, and it does 130 for 2, and search your deck for up to 2 basic energy and attach them to one of your Pokemon. This is obviously here to set up another Pokemon, probably not a fire type. It could be used in a fire type deck to set things up and get things going, which isn't a horrible use. This will be playable with Magma Basin, so you could go second, get this into play turn 1 just using the Eevee. Oh, that's really awkward though, because you need the Eevee in the active to evolve, then you need it on the bench to Magma Base, and then of course you need it back in the active to attack. So you might be, if you don't start Eevee, let's say you do, that's still 2 switches, but if you don't, that's 3 switches, and that's awkward. Obviously, Lost Zone can do something like that, but it doesn't always do something like that, and it is burning lots of resources, including potentially energy attachments, which you might not be able to do here, as well as the you're using the ability on Comfy, right? So you're not getting that value here. And also, this is only applicable for like I don't know how long it's applicable for, but not that long, because these cards will be coming into format pretty soon before rotation. So not, something that you're looking at thinking, oh, I really want to pair this with Magma Basin. Though there are some other fire Pokemon that are surviving rotation, specifically Gouging Fire EX, that are like, okay, I guess post rotation. I don't exactly know. I haven't really thought that far ahead with fire decks, but it's more intended to power up the other Eevelution. So you could just here and go second, attach the Sparkling Crystal tool card, and then attach energy, and then power up another Pokemon. This is solid and viable. 130 turn 1 is nice. If it's not turn 1, it's not that much damage, and the energy acceleration isn't that good. Ultimately, this attack feels a little underwhelming. It's not completely terrible with the EV factored into it, but is it great? Is it going to open up a box? Probably not. It's only powering up one other Eevelution, and theoretically they could gust it and knock it out, and then your Flareon EX, I guess it would have the tools literally to attack next turn. It was just a little bit awkward. This card is not bad, but isn't great either. It's pretty mediocre. And then we have Vaporeon EX. This one can do for 260 to each of your opponent's Pokemon EX. There was a big issue with this attack that, well, one, it's not that much damage. Like, it is a good chunk of damage, but ultimately, it's a 2-prizer. You're probably getting one-shot. We'll say you attack 4 times. I guess attacking 4 times would be enough. Attacking 3 times is not enough. So, if you're able to attack 4 times, then you are in a very good position. Unless you're against a deck that's playing, well, they need to be playing lots of EXs, at least 3. And the EXs can't be Terra EXs, because those are immune to bench damage. That's the big issue. Ultimately, you're going to be hitting these Terra Pokemon and not doing anything. So I think this card's kind of bad. You need to stop printing Pokemon that are bench sniping EXs, because that's not bench sniping anything, because they're immune to bench damage. They're not all immune to bench damage. There's certainly some good Pokemon EXs that aren't Terras. You got what's some like Pheasantipede EX and Squawkabilly EX, Mew EX as well. And this is pretty good against those. If they play all 3, you're in a great position. Ultimately, though, this is just mediocre. There is an energy acceleration to get this going, and this isn't a terrible attack, but it's not great. And also, it doesn't really synergize with most attacks either. It is a bit of an option, but it's not super strong in terms of single target or even like dual target damage. And generally, in toolbox decks, you're not looking to have an attacker that's just pure spread, which this pretty much is pure spread. So use something that has a bit more targeting and a bit more, at least, power in one specific Pokemon to get value. If this was 70, I mean, it's not like hitting single prizes, so generally the value of spread attacks is to finish single prizes or to soften up 2 targets, maybe 3 targets, and to that it kind of does it, but it doesn't do a great job. Then for the original three, we got ourselves Jolteon EX. This one's actually pretty interesting in my opinion. I haven't looked at these before this video, just a quick little glance because there's a lot to absorb here. We can do 60 for 2, but you can discard up to 2 basic energy from your bench Pokemon, and it does 90 more for each card, or yeah, 90 more damage for each card discarded in this way. This is pretty nice. It's not that hard to get energy on your benched Pokemon. We have Tealmass Ogerpon EX, which you could be playing. You could do something else as well. It's not completely free, but it's not that hard either. And so this will be doing a pretty solid 240 for 2. This is probably not doing a turn 1 going second. You have the same issue as, so the way you'd power this up turn 1 going second would probably be Electric Generator. You do have the tool as well, but relying on Sparkling Crystal completely is really sketchy. There's no deck in the game that does that. Dragapult gets really good value out of it, but it's not tied down to Sparkling Crystal. It helps it, and it's really good on the early turns, but if you don't have it, you can still attack by just manually attaching. And this is, you're kind of viewing these as basics. You have that upside. These are like good basics, but you do need the 2 cards, and you need to be in the active to evolve, and then you need to be on the bench to Electric Generator, and you can't Electric Generator to the Eevee because it's not lightning. So, probably not happening turn 1. If you are playing Tealmass Ogerpon EX, I guess you could energy switch, but then that's attaching, and then also using 3 Tealmass Ogerpon EX as an energy switch, which is really awkward. There might be some ways to kind of power this up, but it's a little awkward nonetheless, whatever you're doing. But then you are doing 240 for 2 on a stage 1, and that's pretty good. And as I said, you're kind of like a basic. This is a very solid attack. You have free retreat, which is honestly like not that good. It's not bad, certainly, to have free retreat, but it's not super valuable on this Pokemon. It would be more valuable if you had higher HP, so you'd tank a hit, then retreat, and gain an extra turn or force your opponent to find a gusting option, but ultimately that's not what we see here. That's, generally HP and retreat cost are kind of counterbalanced with each other. This is not a bad card, though. This is, in my opinion, the best one we've looked at so far. The others haven't been terrible, but I don't think they have super high upside. I honestly don't know which the next ones are that came out. I'm not really a big Pokemon. Like I know about the TCG. I don't know about the videos. I think it's the grass one and the what we got Leafeon and Leafeon. So look at Leafeon next. It's grass as well. So the first one on this list, and it does 60 for each energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. This is pretty solid against Charizard EX because it's one-shotting it with weakness. It's not always one-shotting it with weakness, I guess. If they just have 2 energies in play, you're not. But if they have 3, you are. And there's a good chance I don't know if they'll actually have 3. Also, your second attack here is pretty interesting, which does for grass, fire, water. So this is only 1 energy type different than the Flareon, Jolteon, and Vaporeon. And this one says that it allows you to go ahead and heal all 100 damage from each of your bench Pokemon, which is a bunch. Not healing from yourself, but it is what it is. Doing 230 is okay. Certainly not that bad. It's not that much worse than 280, to be honest, because you're one-shotting a lot of basics. You aren't one-shotting the Raging Bolt EX as well as I don't know. You're one-shotting most basic 2 prices though. It's a very solid damage output number. And the healing honestly isn't that useful though. That's the big issue. Like healing just isn't super great in general, and is 100 enough? I don't know. It has mediocre value. It's not a great attack, but it's okay. Like for its attack cost, it's not a great attack, but it's not terrible either. Then we have Leaf Typhoon is definitely the attack that I think will be solid, especially if you are playing like a toolboxy deck. And this could do massive damage. There are some decks that do pile on energy, maybe Lugia. That's a deck that's rotating, but whatever. And then you also have, I guess, Gardevoir would be a lot of the decks that pile on energy just discard it, like Raging Bolt EX or like Chimpow or something. But it is a solid attacking option. It's not great, though, especially as a main attacker will come up short. Then we have Glaceon, which says Frost Bullet 110 for 2, 30 to 1 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Very mediocre attack. Again, you can't really power this up turn 1 particularly easily, and the bench damage isn't going to be taking a knockout really ever. And so this is a pretty mediocre attack. This one is kind of in the similar vein to Vaporeon EX, except it's not doing that much. Softening up 30 is okay, and you can choose where it goes, but ultimately this attack, again, feels kind of weak. You do have this attack for Grass, Water, Darkness, knock out one of your opponent's Pokemon that has exactly 6 damage counters on it. This is a really interesting attack. There's some moderate synergy between the two attacks, but not that much. It's not that impressive. But the really cool thing here is that it's just an instant knockout, and you could do this with Iron Valiant EX. Getting the energies on, not exactly sure what you're looking for. You can maybe Teal Mesogopon EX, but that seems pretty awkward. To Teal Mesogopon EX Energy Switch, you could attach then Crispin Sparkling Crystal, which is kind of sort of viable, really sketchy, but maybe something you could try to do, because you need like 3 switches as well, because you need the Iron Valiant EXs to trigger. So ultimately, I think this is probably not really something you can build around unless we see something that's able to get more damage kind of pretty consistently on the board. I can't really think of anything. I can think of like what Meowscarada EX. That seems pretty bad for pairing with Glaceon EX. So ultimately, this is an interesting attack, but I don't know if it quite has enough going for it. Then we have Espeon EX. This one it can do 160 for 3, just like Sylveon EX, and then to discard a random card for your opponent's hand. This theoretically could be absolutely insane if your opponent's banking on playing a certain card in their hand, but that's not a great use of it. That's pretty sketchy. Then you have this attack, which does for Grass, Psychic Darkness, devolve each of your opponent's evolved Pokemon by shuffling the highest stage evolution card on it into your opponent's deck. This will not shuffle back Archeops, but it will shuffle back, Gardevoir EXs into the deck, Curlies into the deck. If they have the Gardevoir EX, it's not shuffling back the Curlier, just the top one. And this is pretty interesting against like Charizard EX and Dragapult EX, so it's really brutal because now they're losing the Pokemon into the deck, as opposed to, it's still kind of brutal if they go just back to your hand with TM Evolution, but going back to the deck means they need to refind it, so they need to get all these extra pieces, especially with something like Barrel or Curlier or just some Stage 1 Pokemon. If you just TM Evolution that, if you don't take the knockout with TM Evolution, which isn't doing any damage, it's just reducing their HP temporarily, then you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to send it back to their hand, and then they just play it again, and then they do whatever they're going to do anyways. So most of the time, if they're like manually evolving to a stage 2, I guess that's not true, but that's not that common. So ultimately, this card is pretty rough to be hit by sometimes. It is a lot of setup and not doing any damage with your attack, though. Is it really good enough? Probably not. But it is a bit interesting to consider. Kind of like, it's very similar to the Sylveon EX, to be honest. These are very similar cards. Then we have the Umbreon EX, the last one. Though these trainers are important. These trainers are really cool. The Umbreon EX says it does 160 for 3 and confuses. Whoa, this is so boring. You could attack turn one going second, I suppose. But not that easily. I mean, you can do it like somewhat easily, but only pre-rotation. And then you do need... Oh, Dark Practice only accelerates to the bench, too. So you need to switch to the bench, but whatever. You then have the other attack, which says discard all energy from this Pokemon for a Lightning Psychic Darkness, and you draw 1 prize. That's good, but that's not like insane. That's like a lot of the time if you attack for really any stellar attack, you should be taking a knockout. I guess not these that don't do any damage, but like 280 is a bunch of damage and should be knocking out most things. It's not one-shotting everything, but it's knocking out a lot of things. I think this should be take 2 prizes, to be honest, and would be a little more balanced, or not discard the energy. I don't know. It's like kind of interesting. If you get your opponent locked into a position, then you could use attack over and over, but it is awkward to get the energy back on as well. Ultimately, Umbreon EX is also pretty interesting, but probably not very good. And we do have 2 trainers, though, that are pretty good. These are pretty insane. We do have Max Rod, which says it's an ace spec. It's an item, and it says choose up to 5 in any combination of Pokemon and basic energy cards in your discard and put them into your hand. It's like Super Rod or Night Stretcher. So it's 5 Night Stretchers, which it is. Which is crazy. That's like so many cards. Ultimately, you probably don't need 5 Pokemon and basic energy from your discard into your hand, but you probably want like 3, and it's getting them. It's a pretty good card. Exactly what of its best use cases, I'm not exactly sure. Chimperex Caliber could make quite good use of it. Something like Raging Ogerpon EX could make pretty good use of it as well, but ultimately you really want Prime Catcher in those decks as well. But it is a very high upside card, allowing for some pretty insane plays where all of a sudden you could just get all these cards back. At the end of the day, like, how often do you want, as I said, all these cards back? You probably don't need that many. But with TLMS Ogerpon EX or some way to accelerate a bunch of energy onto the board, TLMS Ogerpon EX, you can get 2 TLMS Ogerpon EXs, 2 Grass Energies, as well as an extra card. So you can just get a bunch of energies into play and burst a bunch of damage that your opponent isn't expecting. Is it a good card? It is a very strong card. Is it going to be a great ace spec and see a ton of play? I'm not sure. Prime Catcher is really good, but and it's not making those early game impactful plays. It's a little bit niche as well, but it's a card that just objectively has a ton of power behind it. Then we have Amaris, I guess, and this is a draw supporter that just says draw 4, but at the end of your turn, if you have 5 or more cards in hand, discard your hand. Ultimately, this downside isn't that bad. It does stop you from ramping up to massive hand sizes, I guess, with like Tinkaton EX, which seems kind of weird. Oh, apparently I'm looking at decks, and someone played it and did okay, I suppose. But only one, it's only played by one person. Tinkaton EX isn't exactly okay. I've lost it. It's not exactly the best EX. I'm sure many will say that. Has been played in Japan a decent chunk as well. I mean, some, not like that much, but some. It's a card that has some value, and this obviously isn't doing. Well, actually, no. If this could be used for a burst draw, I believe this will be. So it's at the end of your turn, I believe, after your attack. So you would be able to get the extra cards through this, but then you'll be discarding at the end of your turn and have no cards in hand. I'm trying to think how this. So yeah, I think you take the prizes and then you just discard the prizes. So ultimately, this isn't great with something like that for just building massive hands. But a lot of the time, you're just looking for a good draw supporter. Like if you're playing Charizard EX, that's not a great example. What's the deck that plays 4 Ionos? I can't like think of one off the top of my head. But anyways, there are decks that play 4 Ionos. What's the Guardy rocking? Yeah, it's often rocking. It's rocking pretty high counts of Ionos, potentially 4, and you just want to draw lots of cards. Arven has solid value, but doesn't have insane. Like it doesn't always have insane value, not necessarily what you're looking for. And so this is just a draw 4, and then you're just gonna have items. You'll play them, get basic Pokemon, play them. If you discard your energy, like you don't want to. Well, I guess if you discard, you have to discard your whole hand, which is really bad. But you can play an energy, you can place a Pokemon, and you should be down below that. You should have 4 or less cards in hand, almost certainly, especially if you draw into discard cards. It is a little bit risky, but ultimately, like, it's a solid supporter. There's the question: is draw 4 good enough? It's okay. It's certainly pretty solid. Draw 3 is like, draw 3 obviously isn't that good. It's a little underrated, I guess. Like straight draw 3 isn't particularly good, but is a card that is like a supporter type that you could have mild value out of. It's not like completely useless. It just directly outclassed by other things, and also generally outclassed by most supporters as well. Like Iono is drawing you 6 cards, so and Research is drawing you 7 cards, and so if you want to draw cards, you should just play those supporters. But the Judge is drawing you 4 cards, but this is also drawing you 4 cards, and they're actually just drawing you 4 cards. It's not like you're losing the cards you had in your hand. This is a pretty solid supporter, and one that I think is decent. There is an amount of risk, because if you get caught off guard by it, and all of a sudden you can't get down to 4 or less cards in hand, then you're in a really bad position. But I think the supporter is a really interesting one. I actually really like the design of it. This high risk, high reward, kind of exciting supporter, and it's a pretty cool card. I think it's one that will end up seeing a little bit of play. Max Rod, same idea. These are really cool trainers, though. Ultimately, the Eevelution EXs are cool, I guess. I feel like they aren't great as a box deck. They just don't have enough power. They're kind of mediocre, but these trainers are really cool. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, joining the channel, and all that good stuff. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.